91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo, Buffalo's original alternative since 1982, brought to you by the Buffalo State College Student Activity Fee. We are here today on The Princess is on Another Station with the fantastic, the impeccable Darren Korb. Darren, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing absolutely great. I'm kind of in awe here. You're one of our favorite composers here at the station for video games is concerned. I'm here with Mike Indiano.
Hello.
So, and we got a couple questions for you here today. Mike, you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. When you're composing for a game, what are you given from the game to go off of when you're trying to design in order to make sure that you have something that fits the feel and the emotives that the game are trying to present to you?
Yeah, well, so for Supergiant, I'm actually a part of the team. So for both Bastion and Transistor, I've been on the project from the very beginning. So I've actually been able to play current builds of the game all the way through the project and, communicate with the other members of the team about what's going to happen and plan ahead and things like that. So I think that's different from the way a lot of contractors tend to work, where, a game company will hire them towards the end of the project to make a lot of the music and stuff. And then the game is mostly done or far along by that point at least. I have a lot of access, basically.
How are the guys at Supergiant? Or
awesome.
Women as well?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, how are they? They're great. I mean, Amir Rao, one of the co-founders of the company, is like one of my best friends since we were 8 years old. So that's awesome. I get to work with some really good friends, and everybody there is just super amazingly talented and really fun to work with.
Since you're working on it the entire time that they're building it, so you're given basically the entire time that the project is going. So how long does that generally end up taking them and yourself, I suppose, to make a game and to have everything checked out and from start of a project, story building, all of that, to release day?
Bastion took about 20 months of development, and then there was maybe like another month at the end where it was in certification and we weren't doing anything. Transistor took maybe a little over 2 years. I don't know the exact month count on that one. But so yeah, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 years so far, generally speaking.
You mentioned that you're on the development team with this, working with. How often are your ideas specifically heard? I know there's a moment in Transistor, or moments in Transistor, where you can actually stop the game. The main character will actually hum along to the melody, which is absolutely just, for me, when I was playing through the game, just this kind of like breathtaking moment with all of the color and art, and then this beautiful combination. Is that your input that's being involved there, or just the combination of ideas?
I think it's a combination. I mean, I think in the instance of the humming, the humming button, I didn't actually come up with that. I knew I wanted to include some humming for the instrumental pieces, when you go into turn mode, because I thought, maybe that'll kind of put you inside Red's head a little bit more, You're in this planning mode, sort of inside her head. But the idea for the hum button didn't really come about until we actually had humming tracks for everything. And I think it was maybe Amir who suggested, hey, why don't we just allow you to do this whenever, because we have the technology, we have the track built in there already to all the pieces of music. So it was just a matter of like flipping a switch and creating some animation and stuff for it.
It's awesome. It's one of my favorite parts of the game. That being said, who when you're composing, who is your biggest musical influence, or maybe what are some of your biggest musical influences?
Yeah, it really depends, I think, on what I'm working on. I think generally my influences are just a lot of the musicians that I like, and I've grown up listening to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Jeff Buckley and Radiohead and Bjork and all sorts of stuff in between. They might be Giants and Weezer and, a whole number of different things. When I'm working on a project, sometimes I'll have kind of touchstone artists that I look at for inspiration. For example, when I was working on Transistor, I really looked at a lot of Imogen Heap and really listened to a ton of her. When I was working on Bastion, I looked at a bunch of different stuff, like everything from kind of old Southern spirituals to, Jeff Buckley and things like that.
I question about Bastion as well. Yeah, listening to one of the first tracks on the soundtrack, there seems to be a little bit of Eastern influence there too. I don't know what to call it specifically. Is there any influences like that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. That really comes from the setting of the game. You know, that was one of the instances where we decided that the first section of the game, the actual section where you're in Caelondia or in the ruins of Caelondia, that Caelondia should feel sort of like a amazing kind of Byzantine, almost a Byzantine Empire kind of place. So that's where some of that Eastern influence comes in, is from how we wanted it to feel sort of both, you know, in some ways exotic, but also not wholly exotic. These are sounds that a lot of people are familiar with, but just aren't as familiar with necessarily. And the Eastern influence in the music also, I think, functions as sort of an exotic, to a Western ear at least, an exotic element in the music as well. So I wanted to try and butt that up against more familiar sort of acoustic guitar, sort of Western stuff, and then the sort of trip-hop percussion, and kind of mash all that together.
Yeah, it works really well. The Bastion feel of Caelondia and how the city comes together and everything, that works so well with the music. What does it feel like when the game that you worked on, like Transistor and Bastion, get a lot of really big national press, especially from an indie market that has so much in it, but not much of it gets so much press, seeing like your games on Metacritic winning really good scores and all that kind of stuff? How does that feel for you?
It's pretty surreal, honestly. I mean, it's not any less surreal now than it was for Bastion, I don't think, because, you know, Bastion, we knew we were very lucky just to have the game be received the way it was, and to have people be so positive and really so great in their reception of the game. And we really didn't take that for granted that it would happen again. We sort of expected that it wouldn't in a lot of ways, but just because, you know, that's that sort of thing. You know, you can do everything you can, but a lot of that, I think, is just sort of timing and luck, and you know, where people are at the moment and how they receive something. But I think, yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me still that Transistor is sort of has been similarly received, really, really warmly, and it's just incredible to hear people be so kind when talking about it.
Do you have, out of all these songs you've created in these universes, especially Bastion and Transistor, is there a favorite song that you've composed from either of the games?
Well, that's a tough question, because I have favorites for different reasons, I think. I mean, Setting Sail Coming Home, for me, was probably my favorite thing I did on Bastion, just because it was sort of a proof of concept that I had for a really long time, where I wanted to try writing a piece of music that was comprised of two different songs that could exist on their own. And then when you smash them together, it's sort of like a polyphonic thing happening, which is sort of like an old musical theater trope that happens a lot, where there's two songs that are separate, and then when you put them together, they sort of provide counterpoint to each other. So I had the idea to do that really early in the project, and I composed this music for the first trailer that we did, which ended up becoming the actual background music for Setting Sail Coming Home, and I really liked it, so I thought, oh, let me use this as the bass, and I wrote Zia's song to be able to sort of go over that with a similar chord progression, and then I wrote Mother, I'm Here, the Zulf theme, to the same music, basically, and then I was able to sort of smush them together at the end, and I was very relieved when it worked. For Transistor, I think Old Friends, which is the first track on the soundtrack, is probably the one I was sort of most relieved to write. In that, you know, for Transistor, I spent a really long time looking for the sound of the game. I spent maybe 6 months just sort of experimenting, trying to figure out exactly what I wanted the game to sound like. And Old Friends, I feel like, was the piece that, while I made it and after I made it, I thought, okay, this is the center. You know, I want all the other pieces to sort of revolve somewhere in a radius around this piece, and it really helped me compose the rest of the pieces going forward.
Well, for our show's sake here, to give our listeners an idea of what you're talking about, we're actually going to play that track here on 91.3 FM WBNY. So this is Old Friends. 91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo. You just heard Old Friends. We are talking to Darren Korb, the amazing composer on such games as Bastion and Transistor. Darren, now one thing I want to talk about as well from composing specifically Transistor is I wanted to talk a little bit about the vocals from the game and such, and your experience. We've read a couple of things about that as to some of the recording techniques you used for that game, and would you like to go into detail about that a little bit?
Sure. I recorded all the vocals for Bastion and for Transistor in my closet, basically. I don't have a fancy setup. I have an audio interface and a little preamp, and I have like a decent mic, and just sort of run everything. I do everything at home in my little home studio setup. So for the vocals for Transistor, we had a lot more than for Bastion. So I had a good number of sessions with Ashley over the course of the project, and the way we do it is we'd sort of, I'd write a new song, and she'd come over and record the vocals for the song, and then we'd try to knock out a couple of humming tracks as well, because once we knew we were going to do that, that's sort of a big undertaking to record a humming track for every piece in the game. So, yeah, we sort of tried to pace it out as much as we could over the project. And, yeah, Ashley Barrett is a vocalist I work with, and she did an amazing job. She's the same vocalist who performed the singing voice of Zia on Bastion. And, yeah, I'm just super thrilled with how our vocals turned out.
Ashley's voice is incredible. It's part of some of my favorite songs, like Spire and We All Become on Transistor, because her voice just fills out the melodies so well. Just for my curiosity, and a lot of listeners probably want to know, probably gamers, I'm assuming you are too. I'm assuming you play games in your spare time. What are you currently playing?
Right now, I'm playing Divinity Original Sin. I'm like a tenth of the way into it, meaning like 10 hours or whatever. but yeah, it's very cool so far and super dense and just like an old school RPG, and I'm very pleased to be playing something like that right now. I've started playing Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, which I've been digging, and trying to play some old games that I never got through. Like I started playing Advance Wars. I'd never played that, but I got a Wii U, and I got the virtual console version of that, and that's really fun. I love the strategy games. I'm playing a lot of Hearthstone lately. I've been, maybe devoting more time to that than I should, given how many unplayed games are in my Steam library at the moment. Let's see, what else? Oh man, Valkyria Chronicles I started. I'm sort of in the middle of that. I've got a lot of games I'm in the middle of right now.
That's pretty awesome. It seems really human to hear somebody that I've really been a fan of for a while playing a lot of the same games and having a really cool, diverse library, kind of like us we have at the show. Just follow up for that. What are your all-time favorites? Like top 2 favorite games, if that's possible for you?
Yeah, I would say Fallout 2 is probably one of my favorite games of all time, and then the Rock Band franchise. If I can pick a franchise, if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick like Rock Band 2 or Beatles or 3. I'm not sure. One of them. They're all. I love Rock Band. That's probably my favorite.
I just want to say that when I said Fallout 2, Nick was in very, very excited mode because he very thoroughly enjoys that game. It doesn't really.
I don't want everybody who loves Fallout 3. Like I can't get enough people to be like, hey, go play Fallout 2. It's so awesome.
It's amazing. Yeah, when I played that game, as it was like 1998. I was, how old was I? 14 or 15 or something. And I played that game. It blew my mind. Like the fact, it was like a gritty post-apocalyptic, but like really funny also, and just I love the combat. It was like very tactical and kind of brutal, but really rewarding. And man, I just love the heck out of that game. I think the writing is great, and the world is so thorough, and the music is awesome, and everything about it's rad. Yeah, if you enjoy Fallout 3 and aren't intimidated by like an older-looking game, go play Fallout 1 and 2. Those games are great.
Now, at what age did you start composing and get involved in music, and what instrument did you first pick up?
Yeah, I started singing as a little kid. I did some musical theater from when I was about 5 until I graduated high school. I did plays a lot, and I took a couple of piano lessons as a little kid and I wasn't really into it. And then around 11 years old, I picked the guitar and got into that and really started writing and playing in bands and stuff like that around that time. And then kind of partway through high school, I got really into recording. And once I started getting into kind of multi-track recording, I really thought, oh, this is something that I could, get into in a real way. I think it was the recording aspect of music that really hooked me as something that I wanted to do more seriously. So yeah, I mean, for a while, I played. I was more of a sort of singer-songwriter performer for a long time who dabbled in recording until at some point the recording became more my specialty. I went to NYU and studied a bunch of different things, but I did a little bit of music production and composition and stuff, and I interned in a recording studio for a few years and ended up interning with a couple of composers in LA for a short little while. And I just sort of fell into the composing, honestly. Like, it wasn't an ambition of mine necessarily, but it was a way for me to do something that I loved. That seemed like I had more of an avenue into it, at least. I mean, I did a couple of projects, little small, like a independent kind of film, TV projects, stuff like that. And then, I was really working more as a hired gun musician and producer type of thing in New York and to do my own thing when my buddy Amir asked me to do all the music and sound design and everything for Supergiant. And I said, yes, of course I'll do that.
Any independent stuff besides from Supergiant that you're particularly proud of or fond of?
Nope. As far as composing goes, no. I mean, I did a small kind of film project, which I didn't turn out that great, I think. But I have a band and stuff which I enjoy and something I do for fun on the side called Control Group. So we put out an album over the summer called Hot Swap, and that's a lot of fun. It's like a different outlet for me. It's very everybody sings and writes, and we all switch instruments and stuff, and it's very like 90s garage, pop, Pixies-esque kind of stuff. So that's a lot of fun for us. But aside from that, Supergiant's been taking most of my focus these days musically.
Wow. So that's awesome. And so we're going to have to, us and our listeners, we're going to have to look into that as well, because not a lot of people in the video game spectrum of that. I'm not sure I've gotten into that, but that sounds fantastic.
Sounds really interesting.
That sounds really interesting.
Awesome.
Do you have any current projects right now that you're working on?
We're just trying to figure out what's next, really, because that was Supergiant. We're still kind of tying up some transistor loose ends and figuring out what the next thing is going to be. But I will definitely be on the next Supergiant thing. In my spare time, if I have any of that, I'm working on another album with Control Group remotely. I moved recently. The band is based in Brooklyn, and I now live in San Francisco. So we're trading tracks back and forth and stuff like that, working on a new record for that.
Do you have any advice looking for somebody getting into the industry? I know it's a fairly typical question, but I know lots of viewers of these types of shows definitely want to get into that and be able to really take their interest and make it something that they can do with a lifetime. And hearing something like that, you guys would be awesome.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it depends what you want to do specifically. I mean, if you want to get into music, something that I think is really valuable, or has been for me personally, is just getting your engineering, your sort of software engineering, producing chops up to a point where you can take an idea that you have and just make it sound complete and mixed and good, and just be sort of at least complete sounding. Because I think that's a really critical part of the process for me. I mean, recording is as much a part of my writing process as actual notes and chords and rhythms and everything like that. I mean, it's a very integral part of the character of the music for me, and so I think that's really critical, is to become comfortable with a piece of recording software that you like. I use Logic, but I have used Pro Tools in the past and some other things like that, and I know a lot of people have different preferences, but yeah, my advice is to become as self-sufficient as possible, especially if you want to do something independent. Because you won't be able to rely on you won't be able to hire people. You have to kind of do everything yourself. So, practice instruments, learn to play stuff as best you can, and to get your ideas from your head into the recorded piece of music and have them be as good sounding as possible. So that's one thing. And I had a strange path, I think, into the industry. So in that my friend just sort of asked me to do it, which I don't think is the most common way people get in. I've heard other composers give the advice that people should attend conferences and network and things like that and go to GDC and things like that, which makes sense to me. But again, that's not something that I did. So I'm just suggesting it based on other suggestions that I've heard.
Oh, well, thanks a ton, Darren. We're a huge fan here again of your work and everything you've done. And just to state again, I'm going to say this as nice as possible. Within a sea of especially heavily commercialized games, what it's starting to become, to see the rise of a lot of indie games and to see some of the most breathtaking work as far as combination of soundtrack and gameplay together, it is really refreshing and just a wonderful experience you can get lost in. And as far as my perspective, and I think Mike will agree with me here, it's something that we were talking about this earlier, actually. It's wonderful to play a game and just get lost in it. And I can say on my behalf, I personally get lost in a game like Transistor, specifically for me. It's just when you get to play with the music, it just you feel like you become one. It really just it's amazing, and I can't thank you enough for your work as well as for doing the interview.
I really appreciate that. That's super nice to hear, and yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you guys.
Thank you again. It's been great. Hope you have a good time on future projects, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.
That was Darren Korb, composer of Bastion and Transistor, and hopefully future, as he said earlier, Supergiant projects. Here on 91.3 FM WBNY, The Princess is on another station.
When you speak, I hear silence. Every word a defiance. I can hear